The jungle was trembling. Not from the wind, not from rain, but from the titanic struggle of two of nature's most awe-inspiring creatures, a lone silverback gorilla, muscles carved by the trials of the wild, locked in a death coil with an African rock python whose strength could crush the life from the mightiest beast. The serpent's patterned body was a moving wall of muscle and scales, tightening loop by loop around the gorilla's massive frame. The gorilla's hands that could split branches like twigs, now gripped the snake's thick neck with a ferocity born from desperation, his eyes ablaze with a fire older than time. Every breath was a battle, every second an eternity. The python hissed, its fangs flashing in the streaks of sunlight filtering through the green cathedral above, and the humid air carried the scent of earth, sweat, and struggle. This was not just a fight. This was survival stripped to its rawest form. And in the canopy, the echoes of his roar seemed to call out to the very soul of the jungle, demanding an answer. Will help come? Or will the guardian of this troop fall? Here, strangled in silence by one of Africa's most lethal predators? Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Before the chaos, there was calm. But in the jungle, peace is never a promise, it is a fragile thread stretched over the abyss. Just hours earlier, the rainforest had been a living paradise, a masterpiece painted in gold and green. Shafts of morning light streamed through. Towering trees, their ancient trunks draped in veils of moss, while vines hung like the braids of the earth itself. The air was thick and sweet with the perfume of blooming orchids, the dampness of yesterday's rain still clinging to every leaf. Birds flitted between branches, flashes of red and blue, while insects sang their endless chorus. The forest was alive, breathing, pulsing, and yet in that moment utterly serene. In a sunlit clearing, a young gorilla played, a bundle of innocence and curiosity. His clumsy hands chased a butterfly whose wings shimmered like jewels. He tumbled through grass so green it seemed lit from within, pausing only to beat his tiny chest in a mimicry of the great silverbacks he admired. A sound too soft to threaten anything but sweet enough to melt even the fiercest heart. Each movement was pure life, a heartbeat untouched by fear. Watching from the shadowed throne of a fallen log was his protector, the silverback patriarch, massive, unshakable, a fortress of muscle and wisdom, with eyes that missed nothing. The sun glinted on the silver fur along his back, the badge of his authority. Every breath he took seemed to reassure the troop, "You are safe while I am here." The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. But in the wild, danger is a shadow that waits. And from the undergrowth came the stirrings of something ancient and merciless. The African rock python, a living relic of nature's patience and precision, moved without sound. Its scales, painted in cryptic mosaics of brown and olive, vanished into the forest floor until even the sharpest eyes might miss it. 16 feet of silent death, it did not rely on venom, it didn't need to. Its weapon was pure, unyielding. Force, its forked tongue flicked in and out, tasting the air, decoding the invisible trails of life around it. And then it found it, warmth, small and alive, radiating from the playing young gorilla. The python's eyes, cold as river stones, locked on its prey. It slid forward, every movement a whisper, every muscle coiled with purpose. The jungle still seemed peaceful, but a hunter's shadow was crossing its heart. The young gorilla was seconds away from becoming a story told only in silence, but the python had entered the wrong clearing, for this was the domain of a protector who did not yield. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. The silverback sensed it before he saw it, a shift in the air. The sudden absence of insect song at the clearings. Edge, a faint, cold scent carried on the breeze, reptile. Predator, his head snapped up, and in a breath his warm gaze hardened into steel. His eyes locked on the slow, sinuous shape moving toward his son, and then there was no thought, only action. The log that had been his seat became his launch pad. With a ground-shaking thud, he hit the earth and surged forward, every pound of his weight converted into pure momentum. 2 strides, and he was there, his massive hand closing on the python's tail, just as it gathered its coils to strike. The feel of that living rope of muscle in his grip was the signal. The battle had begun. With a roar that made the treetops tremble, he swung the snake high and slammed it into the jungle wall. For a breath, it seemed enough. But the python's fury was just waking. Uncoiling from the bush, it came on again, and this time it didn't aim with fangs. It threw the full force of its body, slamming into the gorilla like a battering ram. Loops of muscle as thick as his arms wrapped around him in an instant. When the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him. The first coil crushed against his ribs, forcing the air from his lungs. Then another, and another. The silverback's roar tore from him, a sound of pain and defiance that ripped through the clearing and sent smaller creatures fleeing. His massive hands gripped the python's neck, pulling, straining, every muscle on his body standing in stark relief. But the snake was relentless. It was like fighting the earth itself, unyielding, impossible to pry away. Every inch he gained, the python took back in crushing force. His vision began to darken, not from fear, but from the slow theft of oxygen. Yet he did not let go. With a staggered step, he began dragging the serpent toward a massive ironwood tree. His chest heaved, his legs shook, and with a final cry that seemed to carry the weight of every life he protected, he slammed his own body and the serpent's coils against the unyielding bark. The python hissed, its grip faltering for the first time. The fight was far from over. But in that heartbeat, the jungle knew the silverback spirit was not one that could be crushed. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. If you want, I can now continue from here into the next expanded sections, showing the full resolution of the fight, the emotional aftermath, and the spiritual heartbeat of the story. Keeping this same cinematic rhythm, the python's hiss was more than sound. It was a vibration in the air, an ancient cold-blooded threat. Its body shifted like a living river of muscle, tightening again, determined to finish what it had started. The silverback's chest burned, each breath a jagged shard of pain, but his eyes never left the trembling form of the young gorilla, frozen near the edge of the clearing. For the patriarch there was no question. He would not let his son see him fall. Not here, not to this enemy. In a surge of will, he wrenched his massive torso sideways, twisting against the coils, forcing the python's neck hard into the ironwood trunk again. Bark splintered under the strain, flakes of it falling like brown snow. The python's grip loosened, just a hair, but in a fight like this, a hair was life. He shoved his arm between 2 loops of muscle, prying them apart, then heaved upward. With the raw power of his legs, the forest floor shook. Birds erupted from the canopy, startled by the force of his roar. And then, with a sound like a tree snapping under its own weight, the coil around his ribs broke. Fresh air hit his lungs like fire, but he didn't waste it. He seized the snake's head, twisted and slammed it against the tree. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him and he helps me. But pythons are not defeated easily. This one had survived decades in the wild. It knew how to endure. Even as its head struck the trunk, it whipped its tail around the gorilla's legs, yanking him backward. The ground became a blur of dirt, leaves, and roots as the giant ape was dragged, his heels gouging furrows in the soil. The young gorilla screamed, a sound small but sharp, like a knife through the silence, and that cry fueled something deep in the silverback's spirit. No pain could match the fire that lit in his chest. He rolled, using the pythons. Owen pulled to spin them both, wrapping one massive arm around the serpent's thick midsection. His grip was a vice. Every muscle from shoulder to forearm bulged, cords of power forged by years of climbing, fighting, and protecting. The python writhed, but it could not match the raw leverage of a gorilla's frame. Inch by inch, he lifted the serpent from the ground. It thrashed, wrapping tighter around his arms, but the silverback only gritted his teeth and lifted higher. His roar was not just defiance now, it was a declaration: "You will not have this. Life, not today. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." And then came the moment the jungle would remember. With a final, explosive burst of strength, the silverback slammed the python down onto a jagged root jutting from the earth. The serpent's body convulsed, its coils unraveling in a rippling wave. Seizing the chance, the gorilla pushed himself free, his massive chest heaving, each breath loud in the clearing. The python lay still for only a heartbeat before it slithered backward into the shadows, its body melting into the undergrowth, leaving only a faint trail in the leaves as proof it had been there. Silence followed, deep, heavy, broken only by the pounding of the silverback's heartbeat in his ears. Slowly he turned toward the young gorilla, who was still frozen where he had stood. In that moment the boy ran to him, clinging to his arm. The patriarch lowered his great head, resting his brow gently against the smaller one. It was a gesture of pure relief, of love without words. The jungle had been a battlefield moments ago, but now, for these two, it was simply home again. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. But even in victory, the wild leaves its mark. The silverback's side bore deep, dark bruises where the coils had crushed against bone. His breathing was slower now, his movements deliberate, but his eyes, those fierce, watchful eyes, had lost none of their fire. He led the young gorilla back to the heart of the troop, where females and juveniles stirred in the shadows, their worried gazes softening as they saw their leader return. They gathered around him, touching his arms, his back, offering silent acknowledgement of the price he had paid for their safety. The young one nestled close to his side, never once letting go of his fur. In the language of the jungle, no words were needed. This was the way of the wild bond, the unspoken truth that in the dance between predator and protector, love can be as fierce as any weapon. Somewhere high above, a shaft of sunlight pierced the canopy, falling across the silverback's broad shoulders like a crown. "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The forest slowly returned to its rhythms. Insects began their chorus again. A bird, bold enough to break the silence, called out from a distant branch. The jungle, it seemed, had decided. The moment was over, but for the silverback, the weight of it would remain. Every sound, every shift in the wind would be measured against this day. The young gorilla, though, would carry a different memory of strength and safety, of a father who became a wall between him and death. And perhaps in some far-off season, when he too bore the silver on his back, he would stand in the clearing and feel the same fire rise in his chest when danger came. Because that is how the wild remembers. Not through stories, but through instincts passed from one heartbeat to the next. And deep in the undergrowth, the python nursed its wounds, its hunger undiminished, knowing it had faced a foe unlike any other. This was the eternal cycle, predator and protector, both shaped by the wild's unyielding hand. The wicked flee, though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. And so, as the sun bled into the horizon, staining the sky in fire and gold, the silverback sat on the same fallen log where the day had begun. The young gorilla lay curled against his side, safe, warm, and blissfully unaware of how close the shadow of death had come. The patriarch's gaze swept over the clearing, every leaf, every shaft of light, every distant bird call, and for a moment he simply breathed it all in. This was why he fought. Not for glory, not for dominance, but for the fragile, irreplaceable lives that depended on him. The jungle would always test him. The predators would always come, but so long as his heart beat, they would find him standing between danger and the ones he loved. Somewhere deep in the forest, the python moved again, unseen, reminding all who lived here that peace in the wild is never free, it is earned. Again and again by those willing to pay the price. And yet, in that fading light, with the soft weight of his son against him, the silverback knew today the price had been worth it. Because in the language of the wild, protection is the truest form of love. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. The clearing still smelled of fear and struggle, the soil torn where the giant python had writhed in desperation, and the air thick with the heat of battle. Yet now there was a stillness, not the cold stillness of loss, but the warm, trembling stillness of survival. The silverback lay in the center, his great chest rising and falling in heavy, ragged breaths. His fur was damp from sweat and streaked with the python's scales' rough abrasion, but in his dark, intelligent eyes there was life, there was victory. Around him, his troop formed a living fortress, mothers clutching their babies close. The younger ones crouched low in silent awe, the males still standing like sentinels, every muscle ready should danger dare return. It was not just protection, it was love, ancient and wordless. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil, for if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. Then, from the edge of the green, a movement, small, hesitant, almost timid. A young gorilla, the silverback's son, stepped forward. His little chest rose and fell quickly, the last of his fear still lingering in his eyes, but courage pushing him on. He crossed the distance in tiny, careful steps, each one carrying the weight of everything he'd just witnessed, the terror of nearly losing the one who was his entire world. When he reached his father, he didn't speak, didn't call. He simply placed his small hand on the great arm that had so often shielded him. The silverback, weary but unbroken, opened his eyes fully. His gaze locked onto his son's, and in that exchange, the forest itself seemed to breathe again. It was the look of a protector who had fought death and won, not for himself, but for those who needed him. A low, rumbling grunt rolled from his throat, not the booming call of dominance, but a sound soft and deep, a father's reassurance. The young one's shoulders eased, and for the first time since the chaos began, a hint of peace returned to his small face. The troop leaned in. Closer, their grooming now gentler, more deliberate, each touch a silent vow. We are together. We are whole. The sun broke through the canopy then, casting golden shafts across the silverback's broad shoulders, painting the clearing in a warm glow. In that light, the wounds seemed less like scars of pain and more like marks of honor. Proof that even in the wild, where survival is often a solitary battle, there exists a greater force than strength alone. This was a victory born not from muscle but from unity. It was the roar of one answered by the footsteps of many. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. As the troop slowly moved back into the jungle, the silverback rose to his full height, each step steadying with the strength of those around him. The python was gone, but its shadow would not linger, because in this place, family was the light. And just before the trees swallowed them, the silverback paused, looking once more at the place where the battle had been fought. He didn't roar this time. He didn't need to. His silence was its own victory song, and so they disappeared into the green, together, not as scattered individuals, but as one heart, one body, one unbreakable bond in the heart of the wild, where tooth and claw often write the laws. This was a different story, an animal rescue, a wild bond. A touching animal story that spoke not just of survival, but of devotion. It was a reminder for us, too, that our own strength is amplified when we stand shoulder to shoulder, refusing to let the ones we love face the darkness alone. This was more than a heartwarming animal video. It was a living truth, whether in the jungle or in our own lives, miracles are born when love answers the call of need. And that, perhaps, is the wild's greatest secret. That family, in whatever form it comes, is the most powerful force of all.